I have to go get some cash. 900-402-1.
402-110. I'll have them submit that.
Okay. So, are you going?
Yes, I am.
All right. We'll go, we are Northern California and Hawaii, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They did this sometime.
Yep. Did many people, yesterday I was talking with, the other day with Alicia, she's signing too.
She did. Let me see. I think I have everyone that signed up.
Yeah, that's, I think it was this 5 of us, I hope.
So, a lot of people are on the first half of next time.
Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about listings. In fact, how to win a listing. And what we're going to talk about is what sellers want from you, how to prepare for your appointment with the seller, advice about what to do at the property, advice about what to do after the meeting, and summarize some key resources and tools that you'll want to use. So sellers want lots of things, but the most important thing they want is your help pricing the home competitively. The sellers might look online and get information about the home online, but it will not tell them what is the best price for their home, which is where our expertise comes in. Most sellers also rely on us realtors to help them prepare the property, give them advice about how to manage each room of the house to make it most attractive to visitors who might want to buy it. Sellers also don't understand the process and they need to move somewhere, and our expertise helps them to understand the steps they need to take to sell the home within, say, a specific time frame. And help them to figure out ways to fix up the home to get top dollar for it or to get more money for it. Those are the main kind of things that sellers look for from their real estate agents. So when you're thinking about, you got an appointment to meet with a seller at their house, there's some things that you want to do before you go out. So the first thing is you want to review the property profile. Now, the property profile can be obtained from the multiple listing service in your area. Sometimes they call it the tax report. You can also get a property profile from your title escrow company, which will be more detailed. The three important things on a property profile is the ownership history and current ownership, the property taxes that are due or that have recently been paid, and the history of any mortgages on the property. One of the most important things you want to do is review the ownership. You want to make sure that the person that you are meeting with is the person who has the right to sign a listing agreement with you to sell the property. Property taxes, you might find that this seller has very low property taxes, and if they meet the age demographic, being over 55, they might be eligible to take some or all of their property tax base with them to the new property. So it's very important to understand where they're at with taxes, it could make a difference of thousands of dollars for them. Also, if they are in arrears, you would see that. If they're late on paying their property taxes, you might see that on reviewing the property profile. The mortgage history is important too. Now, when you review mortgage history on a property profile, it does not tell you how much they currently owe on the property. It tells you how much they took out the mortgage for originally, or mortgages. And this is important based on market conditions. You want to make sure that that whatever the mortgage balances is less than what they're going to sell the property for. That they're not going to be, we call it upside down, where they owe more in debt on the house than the house would sell for. So understanding the mortgage history is important, and it gives you an idea of questions to ask your seller when you meet with them. Like, for example, the property profile might show multiple mortgages, and some of them your client may not even be aware of, which creates a discussion around what's going on with that home. Another thing you're going to want to do is complete a CMA. A CMA is a comparative market analysis. And we have all kinds of tools for that. But what you want to do is look at properties that are similar in bedroom and bathroom count and square footage and amenities, and see how this property compares to recently active, pending, or sold properties. This is not a class on how to do that. We have another class on completing a CMA. But this is a very important step. You need to go into that meeting armed with data that you can explain when your client, the seller, wants to list the property well over the market. It's very helpful. So those are two things you need to do to prepare. Another thing you want to do to prepare is you want to these are other steps I recommend you do. The first one is send your client, the potential client, a pre-listing questionnaire. I use a Google form for this, and it kind of has some questions you might ask in advance to be ready for the meeting and to get yourself set up for success. So it's not loading it for me. Oh, here we go. This is the pre-listing questionnaire that I do. It's just a Google form, and you click through here, you put in the information, and there's just some basic questions. So I'm just going to quickly fill out the basic stuff to get to the interesting page. Stephen, it doesn't matter. And the decision maker is me. Okay. And it's important to know who the decision makers are, because sometimes it's not just the person that you connected with. It's another family member or a friend or some trusted person who is going to be helping them decide what to do with their property. So when you fill out this form and you do that basic information, it asks what kind of property it is, what they're using it for. So let's just say it's a townhome and it's the principal residence. And then, oops, I have to put in an address. Sorry. Then on this Google form, this is the one I use. You can build your own. Please describe the property. Okay, so it's 4 bedrooms, 2.5, 2 bathrooms, say, pool in backyard, and vaulted ceilings is something they might say. No HOA, let's say. We think the property's in good condition. What upgrades? Let's see. I put a new roof in 2024. Replaced furnace. I mean, I'm just making this up, in 2022. And you could say, what is anything about the property? The seller might say, amazing views of the estuary. Amazing views of the estuary. And by the way, as folks join on Zoom, please feel free to come off Zoom with any questions you you want as we go through this. So for those of you who just joined, what we're doing now is reviewing a Google pre-listing questionnaire that I send to my sellers as part of preparing for the meeting. So I like to get into this matter. What is the motivation? Why do you want to sell? Like when you sell this house, what is the most important thing? Do you want the highest price? Do you want to get it sold fast? Or do you want to have the least inconvenience? And you might be surprised. Sometimes it's not always highest price. So I'm just going to fill this out for now. How long have you owned the property? Let's say we've owned it between 3 and 5 years. What are your reasons for selling, moving to Chicago to be with family? Time frame, I need to get it done in 3 months. And I will be moving in with family. I don't need to find a new place in Chicago. This question about where will you live after the sale can be very helpful and might lead to referral opportunities. So I always ask that. If you currently rent, does your tenant need any? Okay, I don't rent, it doesn't matter. What would make you not sell the property if I don't get my price? Which raises all kinds of questions you can talk about in your consultation, right? So if what is their price, and if they don't get it, how long do they want to stay there, knowing that they really wanted to move to Chicago to be with their family, right? If you find a buyer, would you be prepared to sell it? Sure, let's say yes, right? Price range you want for the property, how much you owe on the property. If you have a mortgage, so let's just say I want 1 million. I just want to give you guys an idea of the questions. I owe 450,000 on my mortgage. That's an interesting question too, because sometimes they will tell you stuff here that doesn't match what the property profile shows or what they might have told you on the phone. If you have a mortgage, are you current on your payments? Yes, I'm current. I'm not aware of any special liens or anything. And then I click next. And then how did you hear about us? I was referred by a friend. And that's it. That's the whole thing. And then they submit it. And then I have additional data from which I can prepare for my meeting, right? And you guys think of questions that aren't on mine that you'd want to use. If you're interested in getting this Google form, shoot me an email at the end of the class or whenever, and I'll make sure you get a copy of the pre-listing questionnaire that I use. So we're preparing for the appointment. So on the previous slide, we talked about doing a CMA. Oops, I'm sorry. I just took us out of the whole presentation. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. 1 second. So we talked about doing a CMA. We talked about a proper property profile. We just talked about doing a pre-listing questionnaire. The other thing you should do, if you have time, is order a preliminary title report. So you contact your favorite escrow company. If you don't have one, ask a mentor or a senior agent. And you phone them and you say, I want to open a pre-escrow with your office and order a preliminary title report for this address. I'm meeting with the client. They're going to sign a listing agreement with me, and I want to take a look at this report. And, sometimes there isn't enough time before your appointment. You certainly want to do it very early on after the listing is signed, for sure. But the advantage of doing it in advance is you can verify that the person you are meeting with truly is the owner. You can research any problems with ownership before you go too far into this. You can find out about any easements or any other financial obligations on the property that weren't known from the property profile. You can see about any special deed restrictions, which is very important with a condominium or a townhouse. So it's a very valuable tool as part of your research. If you are doing the prelim before you go to the meeting, then you absolutely want to make sure that all the decision makers and the people who need to sign the paperwork are at the appointment, because If you don't have a person there who it has to be signing the listing agreement with you, then your meeting is not going to be able to end with a signed listing agreement. So you always want the owner, the decision makers, as well as people who legally sign the documents to be present at the appointment. Another thing you want to prepare is the actual contract. Now, in this digital age, you may have it ready for digital signing, but I prefer on a listing appointment to take a physical printed copy with me and actually walk my client through it, especially if they've never sold a home before. That happens a lot where they've lived in the family home for 30 years and they don't remember, they've never sold a house. So having the listing contract with you, it's called the Residential Listing Agreement or RLA, is very powerful because you can walk them through it and read it with them and help them figure out how to fill it out. You should also go to this meeting with a draft marketing plan. So what are we talking about? A draft marketing plan explains to the client what your plans are for getting the word out to the world about this property. What is your social media plan? What is your plan for communicating with other real estate agents? Are you going to do professional photography? Are you going to have a custom website for the property? Are you going to do drone pictures? Are you going to do a floor map, sort of a map of the floor where the rooms are? I forget what they call it, but anyway, a map of the flooring, how the house is laid out. And are you going to, in your plan, are you going to do a broker tour? Are you going to do open houses? Do you intend to set an offer deadline, or do you want to take offers as they're received? These are just a sample of some of the questions that you want to be including in your draft marketing plan. What are you going to do for them? This answers the question of why they should hire you, right? Because you've got a really good plan for them to get them what they want, which in most cases is top dollar. It's always nice to have a digital or printed seller's guide. Now, a seller's guide is sort of like an explanation to a seller of what happens when you sell a property. It's not very much different than a buyer's guide that we use for our buyer clients, but there's one for sellers, and you can get that from the agent portals. So here are some things to think about for that marketing plan. How will you promote the property on the multiple listing service? In the multiple listing service, you will be writing remarks that'll go all over the internet about the property. I always want to share that with my seller before I publish it, so we highlight things that they feel are important in as many cases as we possibly can. Open house plan. How will you engage with neighbors? Is there going to be door knocking? Is there going to be a special open house for the neighbors? Sometimes that's warranted. Are you going to do any direct mail? That is to say, postcards or flyers that go to the neighbors around the house? How will you reach other agents besides through the multiple listing service? There's all kinds of tools for us to get our listings to agents outside of our office, including promoting your listing at marketing meetings of your region. In Oakland, for example, they have a Monday morning marketing meeting at the Board of Realtors. And other offices have them at different locations. How are you going to promote it at your sales meetings of your team, of your broker's office? How are you going to let agents know it besides through the MLS? Another service for that is you can do a mass email just to local realtors. And that is very inexpensive and advisable. It's just another way of getting the attention of these agents who are seeing lots of listings fly across their desk, so to speak. How will you receive and review offers? We were talking about that before. The other thing you want to do before you go to this appointment, again, we haven't even met with the seller yet, right? This is all prep. First of all, you want to do something called a seller net sheet. Now, the seller net sheet is a very important tool to tell the seller how much actual dollars they're going to get. At the end of the day, after they've paid for your services and other expenses of sale, roughly how much money are they going to get if they list a home at a given price? So my recommendation is create a draft for your meeting, but make it clear that you are going to do a revised one if things change as a result of your conversation with them. You may want to send a revised one after the listing goes on the market. When offers get received, you might want to say, here's what it looks like for the best offer, because offers have terms, and the terms might be different that change the bottom line. And then you send another one after they've gotten into contract saying, okay, based on this accepted offer, here's how much money you should get at the end of the day. You can do this using an app from your title escrow company. They make it super easy and super pretty, or you can use this one. This is from ZipForms. Now, this is not the prettiest one, but I find even to this day that for me, it's the most thorough one. So if you look at this estimated seller proceeds form, it shows a sale price of 1.3 million in the top corner. It shows HOA fees of $750 a month. It shows two mortgages, one with an $800,000 balance and one with or an $800,000 balance and one with a $200,000 balance. It's showing a proration for property taxes because property taxes always get adjusted to the day of closing. And then on the left-hand side are all of the seller's expenses, with the biggest expense being the realtor fees. Sometimes there'll be city and county transfer taxes and other things. Most agents do not provide staging or cleaning services. So if you are one of those agents, you need to build that in here if they're not going to be owner occupying when they sell. So this is the bottom line number over here, $205,237. It's very specific, but it's really, you must clarify with your client, it's an estimate. And this 1.3 may not be, you may use 1.3 as kind of like where you're headed in your mind at what the property should be listed for, but then you go and you meet with the seller and you have a long conversation and they say they want to list, or you convince them that they should list at a different price. So then you would do a new one of these after the meeting to match the new pricing. The bottom line is you want to keep your seller informed every step of the way of how much money they should expect from whatever sale price they ultimately choose. Preparing for the appointment. We're still doing that, right? So the next thing is please, please make the time to drive by the property before you go to the meeting. Ideally, the day before. What you want to check out is, what does the property's curb appeal look like? Is this a house you'd like to go look at inside if you were an average person driving by? What are the circumstances of the neighborhood? Is this house right behind an empty lot or a pathway to the neighboring school? Or is it beside a factory, right? Does it back onto a high, tall, ugly concrete fence? That sort of thing. Good to know, right? Things that would be attractive or less attractive. Sometimes you'll find a home that backs out onto a forested area or a park area where there's never going to be a rear neighbor. And that's a positive feature for most buyers, right? If there are active listings within, say, an eighth of a mile, like really close, similar properties, you should go look at them. Go look at them. If they're active, make a preview appointment with the agent that's listing that home and compare them to the one that you're about to list. Pending properties, get information about the pending properties. How would we do that? We phone the listing agent or we phone the buyer's agent, which is published in the MLS, and ask them. One of the questions I like to ask is, how much are you in contract for? Or they sometimes don't want to tell you that. So you say, can you tell me, are you in contract at or near the asking price that was published? This is all very helpful information for you. And then you want to practice your conversations before the meeting, like objection handling. So what are you going to do if the seller looks at your comps and says they want to list at 50,000 over the comps and you know it's way too high? How are you going to respond if they say, I don't want to pay you your commission, I want to pay you less than that? What if they say they don't want to pay for the buyer's agent commission, right? You want to be able to be comfortable explaining your marketing plan as if you'd done it dozens of times before. So practice, right? You have practice in a safe place with your mentor, with your coach, with another agent. The day before the meeting, or at the very latest, the morning of the day of the meeting, please, please reconfirm the appointment. It's so easy nowadays with texting. Contact them and make sure they're expecting you at that time. Organize your calendar and your commute time so that you're there 15 minutes early. There is nothing less professional than showing up for well, maybe there are some things that are less professional, but one of the most unprofessional things to do is to show up for a listing appointment 15 minutes early. I mean, sorry, 15 minutes late. You don't want to ever be, that's the bottom line. You don't want to be late for your appointment. And then if there's any more than a day that has gone by since you did your CMA, review the MLS again for you don't want to be taken off guard or surprised, right? So before you go to the appointment that day, just take another quick look at your comps. Make sure there hasn't been any new listings or new closings that impact the potential pricing you would need to know about, right? Or a new listing next door house, for example, all that stuff. All right. So now you're at the appointment, okay? Now, the idea here is to be such a professional that they are absolutely going to hire you. And all this prep work I was giving you was the first part of that. The second part of that is what you want to do in this meeting, how you want this hour or hour and a half to go by, right? So first of all, you want to view the property inside and out. You're looking for things that are attractive, things that are unattractive, things that might be a safety concern. The way I like to think about this is when I do a walkthrough, I'm looking for anything in the property that would make a buyer hesitate and say, I don't like this house anymore. I mean, you can't do anything about the bedroom, bathroom count or the layout of the property, but there's so much you can do to a property to make it as attractive as it can be for what it is. You don't want scenarios where, for example, I previewed a home last month where the entire shower had been stripped down to the studs and there was no shower. Clearly, we want to bring it to the market with a shower stall, right? You also are going to, at this meeting, get very clear understanding of the seller's needs and priorities and communicate to them the trade-offs. So you might remember in my questionnaire, I asked them what's most important, top dollar or getting it sold fast. And sometimes sellers aren't clear in their mind about what's most important. Sometimes they'll say, getting it sold fast and getting top dollar are competing priorities. They're both super important to me. So then you need to have a conversation with them about, well, if you want to get the money out faster, that means we may not get top dollar because we won't have time to do all the things that need to be done to make it get top dollar, like professional, like repairs, like upgrades, like professional staging, right? I had a seller once whose priority was they didn't want to be inconvenienced. They wanted it sold, but they didn't want to have open houses. They didn't want to have any showings unless they were home. They refused to move any item of furniture anywhere. And they refused to open windows, so it was always really dark inside. When we'd have a showing, you'd have all kinds of personal effects that made it feel cluttered and crowded. And so their priority was they didn't want to be inconvenienced. They wanted this done with as least inconvenience as possible. And so that changed the marketing plan. They were certainly not going to get top dollar. Were they okay with that? You have to have that conversation. You go through your marketing plan with them step by step. Here is how I'm going to promote your property to the agents out there in the market. Here is how I'm going to promote it to consumers with print media. Here's how I'm going to promote it to consumers with social media. And you want to talk about how you're going to do that. This is a real good place to shine, by the way, in your marketing plan. If you're doing something different than all the other agents. Jack, can you mute?
Sorry.
Yeah, mute if you're not going to be able to. Thank you. During this meeting, you'll have the opportunity to buy the terms of the sale. You'll have an opportunity to go over with them. Are they going to look at buyer love letters? Are they okay accepting having you deliver, setting an offer date as opposed to taking offers as they come in? How do they feel about personal property that they want to not have in part of the sale, or do they want to include in the sale? Um, During this meeting, you're also going to review all the paperwork, not just the residential listing agreement, but the net sheet, the agency disclosure, all of the forms that come with the residential listing agreement pages itself. And ultimately, the goal is for them to sign the listing agreement by the end of your meeting. Okay, you should be going into these meetings with the assumption that they're going to sign. So we talked a little bit about this already. All sellers want the highest price as fast as possible with the least amount of inconvenience. They're never going to get all of that. They have to decide what's higher priority for them and what's lesser priority. But you want to discuss this. You want to have a plan of how you're going to talk about these trade-offs. This is another script practice. What do you say to the seller who says, I don't want to have open houses? Or the seller who says, I don't want to stage my home, I just want to leave all the rooms empty. Or the seller who says, I want to sell it fast, but I want to get what my neighbor got. He hit a home that was beautifully staged and vacant and, upgraded. And this home has old-fashioned linoleum and old-fashioned countertops, maybe tile. And the home that sold next door had beautiful quartz tile with an upgraded kitchen with all the latest, greatest stainless steel appliances and an island in the center and all the very attractive things, right? You need to be ready to have a conversation about prioritizing their desires. Now, during the course of your meeting, your marketing plan will absolutely be impacted by the seller's wants and needs. And so you need to be ready to modify your plan based on what they say. If a seller says, no, you can't, I'm going to live in this property till it's sold and you can't do any open houses, how do you modify your plan? What are you going to do to get the home ready and attractive for people who come through? That's a very simple example, right? So you want to be thinking about that too. Terms of sale. So when you're at the property, one of the discussions you're going to have with your seller is about the terms, right? So you went around the house, you looked at everything, you and the seller discussed their priorities. They want top dollar, they're moving out. You're going to be able to do some work on the property to make it ready for market. So you go through the CMA and help the seller set a good asking price. Asking price is very sensitive to where you're selling. Your asking price is going to be one thing if you're marketing it, say, in Berkeley. And it's going to be another thing if you're marketing it, say, in Vallejo, right? So different local markets have different pricing strategies. So working with your mentor or another senior agent or your coach, you can think about this in advance around what the good asking price will be. And then you want to revise your net sheet or go over your net sheet based on the chosen asking price, which is not necessarily what they're going to sell the property for, but it's a good starting point. You should discuss with the seller their disclosure obligations. Okay, so the basic rule is that a seller must disclose everything and anything they know about the property that would affect the desirability that would affect the desirability of the property. Another way of saying that is if they're in doubt, yes, they have to disclose it. When in doubt, disclose. They should disclose everything they know. And you can talk to them about the TDS form and the SPQ form and how they have an obligation to talk about all the work they did on the property, even if the work completely fixed the problem and there's no longer a problem. They have to disclose that there was a problem and they fixed it. They have to, if they have them, they have to provide all their old legacy documents from when they bought the property. Anything and everything that they can disclose about the property and during their time of ownership should be done. You're going to discuss offer presentation to them. Again, the contract touches on this. The contract says, Mr. Seller, do you want offers presented whenever we get them, or do you want offers held and presented on a specific date? There are good strategic reasons why sometimes you'd want to set for all the offers to be presented at the same time. It depends. All right, then standard offer terms. So from your experience with the residential purchase agreement, you want to go over what the seller should expect. For example, a buyer deposit of 3% should be expected in our area. A buyer might ask for contingencies for investigation, loan, or appraisal. The seller should be aware that these sorts of things happen. So that's something else to discuss with your seller. What's going to happen with offers? The sooner you start that conversation, the less they'll be surprised when the offer comes in with all these terms. Maybe the seller has special offer terms they need. For example, the seller might say, hey, I'm not going to be ready to move. After I get the money, that's when I'm going to be able to finish putting down the down payment on the house I'm buying. So I need to be able to live in this house for an extra week or two after the deal closes. That's called a rent back. Okay, so you want to discuss, is the seller going to need such a thing? What other special things is the seller going to need to make this as smooth as for them as possible? You will be discussing your commission, right? I like to pre-print a number on my listing agreements when I bring them to the meeting, but you don't have to. And you discuss your commission, but you also want to discuss the buyer's agent commission, because the buyer's agent commission isn't showing up anywhere on the listing agreement. So you want to talk to the seller about how it works in our area and how buyer's agents typically get paid because they're buyer's agents. Sorry, let me start again. In our area, it is very typical for buyers through the offer to request as a term of sale that you, Mr. Seller, pay their commission. Are you comfortable with that? And if you are not, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the pros of telling an agent up front that we're not going to pay for their agent, their commission if the buyer requests it. I recommend you review the listing agreement and all the documents in detail with the seller. Ideally not on a computer screen, but if you have to, that's okay. The agreed upon listing price or sale price, the length of the agreement. Now, a listing agreement can be up to 2 years in length, but not any longer. But oftentimes, what I do is I typically make them 6 months or the end of the year, whichever is first. So if I sign a listing in December or January, I'll make it June 30th. And if I sign a listing, in July or in May or June, I'll make it December 31st. That's subject to discussion. The seller may not want to have it be that long. But remember, when you're discussing length of the listing agreement, you have to allow time for marketing prep, on-market activities, getting a buyer into contract, and how long it's going to take to close. So my general advice is try to keep these agreements no less than 3 months, or else you'll be needing to do a modification. Now, getting a modification is not necessarily a problem, but the seller doesn't have to agree to a modification, and it just adds a layer of paperwork that if you can avoid it by making your agreement longer enough, then that's one less thing to be concerned about. Like, for example, let's see a deal you are in contract, you're all set to close on day, in a 90-day deal on day 80, but then on day 70, the buyer falls out of contract, the buyer cancels or whatever, and now you're going back on the market. So now you need a modification of terms if your agreement time was too short. You need to talk with them about the brokerage commission to be paid. We talked about that. Personal property that they wish to leave behind or wish to take with them. And then you also want to go over the advisories with them. There's advisories on fair housing, advisories on home insurance, privacy, keeping it off of the MLS, all that types of things. I recommend you review these documents with your mentor or with your coach or with a senior agent before you go to the meeting. So the goal is to get a signed listing agreement. That's our target, to get them to sign a listing agreement. And if you're going to do that at the property on the day you're doing the presentation, you want to, these are just a few tips to facilitate that. The first thing is you want to be understanding and patient and make sure you handle all the objections that they raise about listing the home with you or listing the home at all. When they say to you, we want to read the paperwork, or we still have to interview several other agents, what do you want to say about that? How do you want to respond to that? Because some of us are very accommodating. Oh, sure, take the weekend. And then you call them on Monday and they say, we went with another agent. They just made this amazing presentation. So we're not doing a script practice today, but these are two of the questions that come up a lot, right? Avoid taking a listing just to get the listing, right? I don't recommend it in an environment like this because you're going to pour your heart and soul and your money into marketing this property. And if your seller is the highest bidder on their own home, then it's going to sit and sit and sit and not sell, and you will be frustrated and you will be discouraged. And you're not serving them. If you have somebody who wants to list a home and you know the price is never going to attract attention, you need to tell them. You need to tell them. Otherwise, you're doing them a disservice. You're not being a true fiduciary. So when you tell them that, they're going to be disappointed. They might push back. If it's sort of on the line, it's a high price, but they really want to quote unquote test the market. There's all kinds of scripts and dialogues to handle that. One potential outcome, but by no means the only one, is you can say, let's sign on our listing agreement that we'll try it your way for 2 weeks, and that you agree in advance that if we don't see an offer, we'll lower the price to where I'm recommending. That's certainly one avenue. But the best listing agents will not waste their time with a seller who refuses to be flexible, or refuses to be not flexible. That's the wrong word. Refuses to be realistic and is living in some magical world where they're going to get 50,000 over what the last one sold when theirs is inferior. Ultimately, it's their home, and ultimately you need to make a business decision about whether to take a listing that is going to be overpriced. I do encourage you to work with your mentor, coach, and other senior agents about how to have that dialogue when it happens. I also want to point out that we are not a discount broker. So sometimes they will pressure you and say they don't want to pay you 3% or even 2.5%. Their buddy's going to do it for 2%. You need to know how to respond to that. You need to be able to express your value proposition. And there's great scripts and dialogues on what to do when a seller wants you to wants to pay you less than your value. And so I encourage you to think about that too. If you want to list something for below the normal percentage, please check with your broker. Each office has a minimum commission threshold, and you don't want to go below that, because what will happen is many of the offices, they will take their share of your commission based on the minimum number they have, not on what you list it for. So that increases the amount of the sale you have to share with the broker. So think about this in advance, have the conversation, understand your own value proposition so you don't get into this situation. Oops. All right. So after the appointment, I recommend you send the seller a thank you note. It doesn't need to be a physical one, although those are very powerful, but at the very least, an email thanking them for meeting with you or thanking them for hiring you to help them sell their home. If you didn't order the preliminary title report yet, order it immediately. And And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to connect with the transaction coordinator for your office or a third-party transaction coordinator that you hire and start preparing the seller disclosure package for the client to sign. Our disclosure packages in California, they're quite lengthy. There's a lot for the seller to fill out about what they know about the property. And so it's helpful to have a transaction coordinator to get this done. So you want to connect with them once you're ready and the listing's been signed. The other thing I do when I get a listing is I send within a day or two a marketing calendar, which actually puts it onto a calendar when things will happen before and then during the actual sale period. And then as soon as possible, we begin work on marketing materials. We might be ordering the photographer to come out. We might be putting together our flyer and the remarks about the house that we want to publish in the MLS system. Maybe a custom website that we get from the photography company. We want to design it, all that stuff. So what we have here is a list of resources that you can use for various aspects of this listing presentation, this listing appointment. Number one is the MLS. There's a tool called Cloud CMA. There's another tool called Realtor Property Resource, RPR. They help you prepare comps and data about the market and the neighborhood that you can share with your seller. My advice about this is if your seller is a software engineer or a lawyer and they're really into detail, maybe a data analyst or something, then go to town on this. But if they are not, it will be overwhelming to them and it'll just be like noise. So then you want to use a simpler presentation tool for the data. Zip forms. So that same resource that we use to do our buyer agreements, that's where the listing agreement, the residential listing agreement form is, where the net sheets are, even some disclosure forms. So Zip Forms is a resource for you for making the documents you're going to need that your seller will be signing. The agent portal, we offer you all kinds of resources for sellers, including branded seller guides in your name and your contact information, your picture, flyer preparation, all kinds of other things. You don't need to go outside to third-party printing or marketing companies to get this stuff. We also have social media support as well there. On the portal also, there's a section called Legal and Compliance /resources. That is where you will find specific documents and disclosures that your seller needs to consider for what city they're in or what county they're in. That's also where you learn about the advertising guidelines that you're bound by in terms of marketing the property. Many of us are using Homelight or DIO, Disclosures.io, which is a web portal for disclosures. Many of you have seen these when you've looked at properties on behalf of your buyers. When you go into the MLS, there's a link to disclosures. Most of us, that link goes to Homelight. As a listing agent, you want to use it too to put the disclosures in and provide that link to potential interested buyers. Homelight also offers offer management tool. It also has offer management tools. So if you're expecting or receiving multiple offers, it can help you organize them and rank them best to worst. I like to do this using a worksheet I created some years ago, but you can absolutely use Homelight for it. All right, so it looks like we have some people who are here in the Zoom. Does anyone want to ask any questions before we conclude? Anyone have any questions?
Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
You were saying some, excuse me, during a listing presentation, you were saying that some of the people would give you some pushback as, I want to read the paperwork first, or I want to interview agents. Now for the paperwork, is it advisable that we could send over a sample copy in advance and go over that with
Yeah.
them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I did. Okay, and the second thing is I haven't had this yet, but I think it may be coming. I want to interview other agents. What would you say to that?
So when they say they want to interview other agents, what it means is they aren't convinced by your value proposition.
Okay.
You have not shown them that you're going to get it done in a way that gives them confidence. Because if it did, they wouldn't want to interview any more agents.
Okay.
Now, sometimes they'll say they want to interview more agents out of a courtesy to those agents. And then in that case, you can say, you know, what the typical script is there any, do you have any, is there any reason why, if you didn't have to interview any other agents, you wouldn't hire me right now? And
Okay.
they say, no, but I feel an obligation. It's my friend. So then you say something like, look, sign with me now. Let's get started. Let me get to work for you. And then I will be happy to phone this other person and tell them that you made this decision so you don't have to feel badly about it.
Okay.
That's one script, right? Um, as long as you have communicated your value and they are saying there's no reason why they wouldn't hire you, then there should be no reason why they don't want to sign the agreement. Now, I have to tell you, quite honestly, there have been many, many, many times where I have done a listing appointment with somebody who was already predisposed to hiring me. They were not interviewing other agents, and they wanted a few extra days to go over it with a family member or think about the paperwork, and I have granted them that. But in those cases, I'm almost 80, 90% of the time, I'm not competing with anyone. So I never felt that I was going to lose them because I gave them that window. And it made them feel less pressured. But
Okay.
if they're interviewing two agents or three or four agents and they've got interviews today and tomorrow, you are going to get in there and get it signed because you are not going to get a second chance.
Okay.
Good question, though.
And one last question.
Sure.
You said one each broker, I don't know if you said brokerage or office that they have a threshold on the commission.
Yes.
How do we find that out? Who do we
Just
talk to?
call the broker of record.
Okay.
For your office, Gene, it would be Eddie Moran.
Eddie Moran.
And the same thing for Victoria and Jack, who are on the call with us. It's Eddie Moran. He'll tell you.
Oh,
It's
okay.
also all agents get a policies and procedures manual when they join the brokerage. You can also look there if you can find it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It is actually published on the agent portal. You can go to the agent portal, I think, under
Okay.
legal and compliance and get the it's called the PG&E manual,
Okay.
policies and guidelines.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Do either of the other of you who are on this call live with me have any questions? Okay. Oh, Victoria?
Steven, I just have the question, not regarding this meeting. So are we meeting on Zoom within 30 minutes?
So you're live to the world right now.
Yeah, I know.
So I believe I've got to look at my calendar. I don't think I don't think I have you on my calendar today. Let me just look. I have a meeting at 2:30.
Yeah.
So
So,
you're on my calendar, 2:30.
okay, great. And welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my
I-
screen. Oh, is there another question?
Yes. So, your presentation about win the listing, right? So I think we're all here, a new agent. You show us all the tools, things that we can do. What do you think the new agent can do the best part? You know, there's a lot of experienced agent out there, or do you see any new agent that have been like, oh, wonderful case you can share with us that they do really good as a new agent?
Well, I don't want to mention names
Okay.
in this space, but there are absolutely in the Oakland office where you are, Jack, of the deals that have closed this year, 4 of them have been with sellers. So new agents are getting listings. And if you like, you can contact me separately offline,
Okay.
and I will share with you those agents, a few of those agents' names. You can reach out to them and ask them how they did it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the last thing I want to share with you guys is, if I can get the screen to advance. Come on, really? is my evaluation form. Here it is. So what you're seeing now is my evaluation form. And if you want a copy of this presentation, you just click on this QR code, and there's a very short Google form to fill out, and then my assistant will send you the slides that we went through today.
And are you going to do this class again?
Yeah, I do this class every few months, but if you want to watch it again, it will be on my YouTube page.
Okay.
So just if you don't have the link to the YouTube page, just send me a text and I'll share it with you and you can watch it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you being here. I hope the conversation was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.